Imagine a quiet, picturesque town in Britain, the kind where neighbors know neighbors and trust is freely given. This is Worcester in 1973, a place of gentle hills and historic charm, a sanctuary from the bustling world. But beneath this idyllic surface, a darkness was brewing. A darkness so profound it would shatter a family and send shockwaves across the country, leaving an indelible stain on the collective memory. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of David Arthur, a tale so horrifying, so baffling that it compels us to look closer, to understand the unthinkable. Get ready, because the truth is far more terrifying than any nightmare. Our story begins with David, a seemingly ordinary 21-year-old. He'd left his small village driven by ambition, arriving in Worcester to pursue his studies. Without student dorms or bustling hotels, many families offered spare rooms for rent. David found his accommodation with the Clynes, Clive, his wife, and their 3 young children. There was 4-year-old Billy, 2-year-old Dawn, and 9-month-old Samantha, a precious baby at the heart of their home. The Clynes, a hard-working couple, Clive, a lorry driver, his wife working in a local shop, welcomed David with open arms. They saw a quiet, polite, studious young man. They didn't just see a lodger. They saw an older son for their young family, a surrogate big brother. This trust was profound, unconditional. They relied on him, even asking him to babysit their little ones when their work schedules stretched late into the night. David, always agreeable, saw it as a fair exchange, a way to reduce his rent. Life for a time was perfect, an innocent arrangement, a picture of familial harmony in a peaceful English town. Then came April 13th, 1973. A day etched into the darkest corners of Britain's history. Clive and his wife headed to work, leaving their precious children tucked safely in their rooms, giving them strict instructions to be good, to not disturb David. Billy played with his toy tractor. Dawn clutched her doll. And little Samantha, just 9 months old, lay in her cot, her gentle coos turning into insistent cries. Like any baby, she cried for comfort, for a change, for hunger. But her cries, innocent and helpless, began to fill the quiet house, piercing the tranquility. In his room, David, who harbored a disturbing aversion to the sound of crying babies, felt a familiar tension build. He pressed his fingers into his ears, pulled a pillow over his head, desperate for silence. The cries persisted, echoing, grating. He reached for a beer, then another, trying to drown out the sound, to calm the storm brewing within him. But Samantha's wails, relentless and innocent, burrowed into his mind, transforming from a minor annoyance into something truly unbearable. Something snapped. David exploded from his room. He burst into the children's sanctuary, his gaze fixed on tiny Samantha. In a horrifying act of pure, unadulterated rage, he placed his hand over her mouth, pressing down, stifling her cries, stifling her breath, until her small body went still. But the madness once unleashed would not be contained. His bloodlust, fueled by alcohol and an unfathomable inner demon, turned next to Billy. He snatched the little boy's toy tractor, tossing it aside like trash. Then, he found a metallic cable, wrapping it around Billy's young neck, tightening as the 4-year-old struggled, reaching for his attacker, fighting for his life, until he too succumbed. And still David wasn't done. Little Dawn, huddled, clutching her doll, trembling in terror, watched the unspeakable unfold. David tore the doll from her grasp, casting it away. Then, he found a knife. In a final, brutal act against the living, he drew the blade across Dawn's throat, severing her life with chilling precision. The screams of the dying child didn't touch him, didn't slow him. This was not enough. The depravity deepened. David returned to innocent Samantha. He retrieved a hammer from the storage room. In a monstrous act of desecration, he repeatedly struck her tiny head, as if trying to erase her very existence. The silence that followed was deafening, absolute. Hours later, Clive and his wife returned home, expecting to be greeted by the usual sounds of children's laughter or playful squabbles. Instead, an unnatural silence hung in the air. A cold dread began to creep in. They walked through their front door, only to find a scene of unimaginable horror. Blood. Everywhere. Splattered on the walls, staining the floorboards. The mother's heart seized. She ran to the children's room but found nothing but more blood and empty beds. Their babies were gone. David was gone. Clive, trembling with fear and disbelief, called the police. The police arrived, and even seasoned officers were shocked by the carnage. Where were the children? Where was David? Detective Bob Reese, flashlight in hand, searched the house, its cellar, its attic. Every corner was stained with red, but no bodies. It wasn't until he noticed sparse drops of blood leading outside towards the back garden that the true horror began to unravel. Following the trail, shining his light into the night, Bob Reese made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. There, grotesquely displayed, impaled upon the fence separating the properties, were the mutilated bodies of the 3 innocent children. A sight so barbaric, so unspeakable, it brought hardened officers to tears. The nation was aghast. The search for David was immediate. He was found, and his confession was as chilling as his crimes. He admitted to drinking, to being out of control, to the baby's cries driving him to murder. He recounted using a garden fork to further disfigure the bodies before hanging them on the fence. The court, disbelieving such brutality from a seemingly normal young man, ordered a psychological evaluation. The verdict? David was 100% sane. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in late 1973. Justice, it seemed, had been served, but then came the final devastating blow, a twist that still ignites fury to this day. Just 6 years later, David Arthur, the man who murdered 3 innocent children, was released from prison. Given a new identity, a new life, he walked free, disappearing into anonymity. The official reason? Good behavior. Meanwhile, the children's mother, shattered by grief and the unbearable knowledge of her children's brutal deaths, tragically took her own life. Clive, their father, moved away, remarried, and tried to rebuild a life forever scarred. The injustice of David's early release ignited outrage across Britain, sparking widespread protests and calls for reform, forever cementing this case as a dark symbol of a system that, for some, failed catastrophically. The baby's cry that unleashed a monster. A true story, a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters walk among us, disguised in plain sight. Thank you for joining us for this difficult but important story. If you found this case as compelling as we did, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. We'll see you next time.